And welcome to today's webinar. And today's webinar is Know Your Benchmarks and Best Practices for Contract Training. And we're very happy to have Leslie Larrabee with the California Corporate College with us today, as well as Evelyn Dow-Simpson of Central New Mexico Community College. And today's webinar is being brought to you by AuguSoft. And for those of you who may be new to AuguSoft, we develop a software product called Lumens, which is an enrollment management software system designed for the continuing education industry. But before we get started with the webinar today, just wanted to run through some just real general guidelines. We'll be asking through the course of the webinar today just a couple of polling questions, and you'll see those questions displayed on your screen, and then you'll have about a minute to respond, and then we'll read out the answers and then continue on with the presentation. We are recording the webinar today, as we do all of the webinars we do here at AuguSoft, and then we will send out an email with a link to the recording as well as copies of the slides. And also, if you go to that link right there on the page, you can also access archived webinars that we've done in the past there. Also, just ask if you do have to step away that you not put the call on hold, that it seems to work better if you dial out and then dial back in. And then finally, we are going to save some time at the end for questions. So if you've got a question, if you could just submit that through the question box on the toolbar on your right-hand part of the screen, and then we'll, like I said, get to as many of those questions as we can at the end. So with that, I think we're ready to roll. And so wanted to, again, welcome our presenters. We have Leslie Larrabee, who is wearing a number of hats. She's with California Corporate College. She also does consulting with LERN and is also a product advisor here with AuguSoft. And then we're also happy to have Evelyn Dow-Simpson with us. She is the Associate Director of the Workforce Training Center at Central New Mexico Community College. And so with that, welcome Leslie and Evelyn.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that generous introduction. And hello, everybody, as we're about to launch into our webinar today about knowing your benchmarks and understanding that what these best practices or best practice benchmarks are for contract training. I'm going to be covering kind of the theory of benchmarks and giving you the actual benchmark numbers, and then Evelyn has been kind enough to join us and share with you the benchmarks that she's been tracking for her institution around her contract training business. And so you've got the theory and the application all today. So we are going to be talking, benchmarks just at its fundamental level is about comparing not apples to oranges, but apples to apples. And so it is clearly about understanding what are the significant numbers that are important, with the significant data that we need to be tracking in order to best guide the decisions that we're making about our contract training business. And so before we kind of launch into some of that, I'd like to get an understanding of how often you in the audience today are using data to help drive your decisions. So if, Chris, you want to launch our first polling question, we'll get an idea of what they're talking about.
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. So you should all see the first question now up on the screen. How often do you use data to help drive your decisions? And we've got a couple of different options for you to choose from in terms of answers. So we'll give you a little time here to respond, and then we'll read off the answers and continue on with the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Chris. It's just one of those, helping to build a contract training practice or manage a thriving one. There are decisions that you have to make along the way, and one of the things we're talking about today are what are those significant numbers or benchmarks that we need to be comparing our program to in terms of those organizations that are really following the best practices.
All right, so here are the results of the question. 14% said that I use data to make all my business decisions, and the rest of the vast majority, 86%, said that I use the data I can find, but I know I don't have it all. And fortunately, nobody says they're not using any data at all to make decisions. So
yay! That's great. And I totally understand the overwhelming response to the, I use data where I can find it, but I'm not totally confident that I have all the data that's required. And then one of the beautiful things about utilizing a tool like Augustoft's tool is we make sure, because we've built in these LERN benchmarks and LERN best practices into the software, that you're able to capture all of that data. But what we're going to share with you today are what are those things I need to track. So it is about, this may not be your forte, but it is about bean counting. So it is tracking, it's going to be, we're going to talk about what it is we need to track, but it is about, it is about counting every time, every incident that you're doing something in order to understand in the end how well you're tracking towards those benchmarks. So what beans do we count? So here's the list of beans, and know that this presentation will be available for you, so you don't have to jot it all down. But I do want to point out some of the highlights. So salesperson, please don't take the titles as, I've got to have somebody in my organization named salesperson, but it is who is responsible for selling that particular contract, whether it's the dean, the director, program manager, or you do indeed have somebody as a salesperson. Who you're selling it to, what industry they're from, what category of curriculum, of program are you selling into. Really important to understand in terms of the kinds of programs that you have on board, that you have within your offering. Which ones are, which category? Am I selling more, management and leadership training, or am I doing more technical training, et cetera, things like that. How the contract is actually generated. Does it come from repeat business? Did I get this opportunity from a referral, or is this something that I did, that I got, cold or from one of my marketing campaign efforts? So anything that's not repeat or referral business is considered a cold business. When our discussion started, this gives you an idea of how long your sales cycle is, and it's really important to understand how long that sales cycle is, so that you understand, how to do projections in terms of what you're doing in the future. So that discussion started helps you understand what your average sales cycle is. When the contract actually started, how much did you charge? How many participants were there? And how much did it cost you to deliver? The quality of the delivery. Did they cancel? So that gets you to your cancellation rate. And then from a marketing standpoint, your leads, your prospects. What's the contract actual benefit, and what kind of dollars am I spending on promotion and sales? So keeping track of all that information, these are the beans that you need to count in order to get to those benchmarks. So I'm going to go through the top benchmarks that LERN has pulled together, giving us, they've surveyed and participated in a number of program reviews that gets them to these places of benchmarks, looking at, from a best practices standpoint, what are the leading organizations in contract training doing, what are their benchmarks, and this gives you an idea of how you compare. If you understand what your benchmarks are, you can compare to the best practices. So shooting for an operating margin of 60%. And in LERN terminology, to get to your operating margin, you're going to take the total revenue that's being generated by that particular contract, or your organization as a whole. So operating margin, you can talk about an individual contract. You can talk about a section of contracts, whether it's segmented by salesperson or it's segmented by industry sector, however you want to look at that. Or you can look at your program as a whole. These percentages apply. And so, but to get to operating margin, you take your revenue, your total revenue, and that's that 100% of what you're looking at is your revenue. And then from that, you're going to take any promotional costs. And typically with contract training, that's really a direct sales cost. Maybe you're doing some outbound market research, but what's the cost of your promotion? And then from a production standpoint, what is it that it's going to cost you? This is your instructors, materials, any direct costs that you have related to the actual delivery of this particular class or contract. You take those two numbers and you subtract that from your revenue and you get your operating margin. And so you should be not spending more than 40% on the delivery and marketing of that particular contract. And that's how you get your operating margin. And from your operating margin, you're going to pull out your administrative costs, any overhead, any salaries that you're paying, et cetera. And then you can get your net revenue or your net profit. Far be it from me to talk about profit, but stellar contract training programs are operating with a margin of 60%. Okay, so your cancellation rate, unlike open enrollment, cancellation rate for contracts is pretty small, but you should be shooting for 5% or less in terms of a cancellation rate. And so, you don't want to, in contract training, you are securing resources and facilities and instructors and et cetera to apply that. And so, you want to be pretty sure that that's going to be a go before you implement. So looking at a cancellation rate of less than 5%, that's what outstanding programs are doing in contract training. So their cancellation rates are significantly lower than their open enrollment side of the house, but still something you want to keep an eye out for. All right, quality and service. Using a Likert scale from 1 to 5, which is the recommended scale that you use in terms of tracking quality and service, your delivery for a particular class, you're looking for a rating of 4.2 and above. And so you can look at not only from a class delivery standpoint, the quality side of the house, so how are, looking at my, my smile sheets, I can get a general idea of the experience that the student had, but you also want to be doing some sort of customer satisfaction survey where you're actually dealing with the person or persons to which you sold the training and get an understanding of what your quality mark is in regards to providing that customer service. Again, it should be 4.2 or above in terms of what you're shooting for from a benchmark standpoint. Quality and service are one of those, those key indicators to, and links to your ability to do repeat and referral business. And so sustainability of your program is really dependent upon the kind of quality scores you get. And so it's really good to keep track of that. So I'd like to do a quick poll question and ask you about how you're doing from a quality service standpoint. So if Chris, you want to launch that polling question?
Sure. Thanks, Leslie. Everybody, you should now see the question on your screen. Are you conducting evaluations of your programs? And again, we've got a couple of different options for you to choose from in terms of responding.
And as I was talking about, as you're responding, there are two different aspects to this, but both are linked directly to the kind of repeat and referral business that you're able to get from your current customers, and that is where organizations really thrive, is the level and way that they're able to serve their customers.
All right, well, let's see what we've got here for results. So 43% said that they are doing both class evaluation and customer service evaluations, and 51% said that they're only doing the class evaluations, and then 3% said yes, but only the customer service, and then 3% are not keeping track of evaluations.
Okay. I applaud that 43% of you that are doing both class evaluations and customer service evaluations. You clearly are recognizing the value of having that information as you drive your programs forward. And I totally understand the 51% of you that are only doing class evaluations, but I want to encourage you. I mean, you don't have to do a customer service evaluation after every incident. This is something you may want to do on an annual or semi-annual basis, but I think it's important for you to get an understanding of the level of customer service that your organization is providing to those that you're selling to. So I want to encourage you to do that. And it doesn't have to be a complicated, complicated evaluation, take very little time. Maybe you can implement it, using SurveyMonkey or a tool like that. But getting an understanding of customer service as well as the quality of the instruction or services that you're providing to your organization is extremely valuable when you're talking about a sustainable and a growing contract training business. So let's talk about some sales-related things. So here's where we're talking about LERN Benchmarks in terms of that repeat, referral, and cold business. So you're really looking at, in order to generate a 50% repeat business coming from your current client base, you really are looking at, you need to have those quality scores kind of up there. We're looking at a 25% that comes from referrals from your current clients or from your partners or from other, other departments. You really are, again, you get those referrals from those customers who are extremely happy with what you're doing. You also get them from organization, other entities within your own institution, perhaps, or your partners, when people understand the level of quality so that you're able to provide. And touting how well you do is something that needs to be a lead message in your marketing campaigns. 25% coming from kind of other places. I'm not a real fan of the cold call. I think it's it's an expensive way to go, but generating new business from your community through your marketing and outreach efforts is as important as generating that referral business. So as you take a look at what how your business lays out in terms of where it's coming from, keep an eye on the fact that this is this is what leading programs are doing from a benchmark standpoint. Just want to quickly touch on here that LERN Benchmarks talks about the kind of products that you're releasing, as well as the kind of customers, whether or not you've got new business kind of coming in. Central New Mexico, Evelyn is going to be talking about from a businesses served and new business served. She's shooting for a 20% of goal of reaching new business. LERN talks about 20% of the services that you're providing, the products that you're providing, should be something new. And this means that your program managers really need to be keeping an eye on the horizon, what's coming in, what's coming down the pike in terms of new ways that you can deliver the services that you're providing, or new skill set requirements, new industry sectors that you're going to approach, but being able to take a look at and making sure that 20% of what's in your mix is going to be, needs to be something new. Okay, again, these are sales numbers. Contract training really is, if you don't sell it, you don't get it. You don't get the business. So really taking a look at your lead, not prospect, not somebody that you've just, mailed your e-blast newsletter to, but somebody that has connected with you, has talked to you about a particular project or an idea. That's a lead, and you're in that qualifying stage. So somebody that's a lead, how many of those conversations that you or your salespeople engage in are actually translating into actual contracts? And a good benchmark is that out of 4 conversations that you're having, one of them should be turning into an actual contract. What that indicates to you, if you have got a ratio that's larger than that, is maybe the qualifying process that you're going through for your leads may not be stern enough. Maybe you're not doing a good enough job at doing that needs assessment, pre-qualifying, asking about budget, things like that. Because those that are, those folks that are really outstanding in the contract training field have got a ratio of 4 to 1. And so you want to make sure you're tracking this ratio. If it's off from this, gives you some information about how you can approach your sales process. And speaking of sales, all right, so here's the biggie. Your salespeople, and I know that guy looks kind of silly, but I like his enthusiasm. So I can appreciate that as a director of marketing and sales. I want my salespeople to be enthusiastic. However, we're looking at that salesperson needs to be generating 6 to 20 times their salary. You're going, that's quite a spread of salary, but it often is your salespeople and where you're located. Maybe your community, is a little more rural or suburban, and it's not right in the heart of, corporate headquarters. You don't have that luxury. So, but when you do have that luxury, they ought to be generating about 20 times their salary. Okay. When you're in a little more, rural opportunity, there aren't quite as many opportunities. You still want them generating at least 6 times their salary. So as you look at your own market and the markets that you're serving, you want to take a look at the kind of revenue that your salespersons or persons are bringing into your organization. And a good benchmark is that it should be anywhere from 6 to 20 times their salary. All right, so I've given you the theory. I've given you the places that you should shoot for, and now I'm going to turn it over to Evelyn, and she's going to share with you what they're doing at Central New Mexico's Workforce Training Center and the kind of benchmarks that they've been able to hit to help them track and manage their contract training business. Evelyn?
Hi, Leslie. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this. We're big fans of the LERN Benchmarks. We think they provide excellent guidance. They've helped us quite a bit over the years to mature in our business and understand best practices throughout the nation. So we're a valued member because I know we appreciate the input. We constantly strive to improve, and some of the benchmarks we meet, some we are short of, some we change and sort of kind of blend it with our own benchmarks in our area. And I'm glad you said about the 60 to 20% because that might not work in Albuquerque to expect 20%, but we do have expectations, and we've come to embrace the word sales and the things that go along with it. So I'll just tell you a little bit about how we're using the tools to measure and to track some of our benchmarks. Right here, the first slide that we've provided here is really one of our measurements. When we say new businesses served and new businesses served, this is something that we measure for our state report. And I think some of your listeners here probably have a state reporting requirement or mechanism where they might have to measure different things in terms of non-credit contract training. So we also measure various things in our state reporting, but one of the items is new business served. Now, our state defines it as businesses that we haven't served in the current fiscal year or 3 prior fiscal years. So it could be that we did business with a company 5 years ago and then kind of fell off the map of working with them, and we have to go and re-engage. And that's kind of a neat opportunity because while we don't have businesses popping up every day in Albuquerque, we certainly don't want to lose sight of businesses that we have performed with in the past and worked with. So we capture that as new business served. We're really looking at the full 4-year picture of that. But in the last 3 years, we've averaged about 35% new. So it's really nice. You know, when you look at our whole portfolio, about 1/3 of the business that we serve is new to us or re-engaged with us. And that we feel is something valuable to track. It helps our sales team to understand. I think it helps the college overall to understand that we are servicing our customers. We are going back to looking at people we've worked in the past. We are definitely responding to new businesses that have opened up in our area. We work in terms of economic development, and we keep our eyes and our pulse on what's happening in our area, what companies are coming and going. And we kind of think that while that product mix is essential, we also think the outreach and the efforts in working with our clients is equally essential. So we've thrown that slide in there as a tracking tool in our case in an application. And with the tools we use, we're able to measure this quite successfully. We also measure literally our contact hours and our individuals served. So what this chart is showing you in terms of our contract and grant activity, and right now currently we don't do a lot of grants. We do have a Solar Center of Excellence grant through the energy partnerships underway, but we have not traditionally been a huge grantee, if you will, here in New Mexico in terms of non-credit training. We are hoping to grow that. So I can confidently tell you that the majority of these contact hours really are on our contract training side of things, other than the one grant that's underway. So we look at our contact hours in terms of what we've done in the last 3 years and in how we've used the tool that we use through AuguSoft, Lumens. We refer to it casually as Lumens. But this tool allows us to really look at the number of students that we serve and the number of unique students or unduplicated students, if you will. So if you track the chart and you think, well, our volume is serving about a little over 2,000 a year in the non-credit side, some of those are duplicated because they take more than one class. And we can see by looking at the chart that we've reduced in 11-12, we've had less students duplicated. So they're taking maybe less classes, but the contact hours are not as severe of a drop. What I've come to embrace about having the data and measuring these things is, while you might not always like the outcome or the results, at least you have the information. So if you're making decisions for your business based on the data and based on the information, things like this will help to guide those decisions. So I'm sort of thinking internally, don't shoot the data messenger, but sometimes even bad news is really good information because we can be agile, we can respond. So this tells us a little snapshot. Now, the reason I put the registration efficiency in here, this is open enrollment, so this is not directly tied to our contract training. But the value of having an online registration system has made staff a little more resourceful and useful to better support contract training. So if you're using less staff time to process paper pencil registration forms, as we certainly did prior to 2009, then that can be very staff time exhaustive. It's open for error, for mistakes. It's not agile. It's very slow. It consumes an incredible amount of staff time to do that. Having a very efficient online, user-friendly, quick and easy registration system frees the staff time, which allows them to engage more in the supporting the fulfillment and the deliverables and the needs for contract training. So I think it's a helpful slide. I think as the external customers continue to increase the gold line there, that's good for CNM. And the less and less staff time that we have to expend on that one segment is also good for CNM. Then we move into something new that we've done out here. Because of using the Lumens tool, it made us very, very easy to partner with third-party providers, namely Ed2Go, which is also now offering the Gatlin courses. So we can sort of nibble away at the online opportunities, especially being that New Mexico overall is generally a rural area. And this helps bring in new revenue to the college that we didn't have previously. And we can see that our customers, while the enrollment is modest and a couple of years almost the same amount, the revenue that it generates is slightly higher, meaning I think that they're taking a little bit more expensive classes. We offer the classes at the suggested retail price. We haven't increased them at all, but just to see that little growth in revenue. And the fact that those programs really don't take much from us. They use our portal to register, so we're not having to do a lot of oversight and management. In general, those are the types of things that we're measuring, that we're looking at. There's certainly quite a bit more. The tool for us has been incredibly valuable in terms of reports, being able to capture data quickly, being able to resolve things, even if it is a refund to a customer. We're moving into different stages of using the tool where we're actually starting to invoice for our contract training customers. That goes live tomorrow. And we're thrilled about it because, again, in terms of resources, that's going to be a tremendous value to the college for saving staff time, resources. And it's also the curve for increasing efficiency and information is really going to jump up. I think it's going to be the best thing that's happened to contract training for us in some time. I think that's all the information I have, but if you have questions, I'm certainly here.
Yeah. Thanks, Evelyn. I really appreciate that. And I'm just popping up here. I want to make sure that people understand that LERN is offering a contract training only conference in April where we will talk explicitly about these benchmarks, how you can attain them, better ways to track, as well as a number of other things about your contract training business. So I just want you to be aware that that's out there in terms of a resource for your contract training business. And with that, I'm going to open the floor and the microphone. Well, not the microphone, but I'm going to open the floor for questions. And feel free to ask them of either Evelyn or myself, or if Chris, if you want information about Augustop. So, Chris, he's the one that controls the question box. So
I'm the questions gatekeeper, and just wanted to remind people, if you do have a question, if you can just submit that in through the questions box on the toolbar, and then we'll spend the last part of this webinar answering questions that you might have. And we have a couple questions here that have come in, so want to get to those. First question is, if a customer cancels a contract within 1 week of training commencement, we typically invoice 30% of the contract fee. Is that a typical rate?
It is a pretty typical rate. Because you have you've incurred expense, a week ahead of time. You've got an instructor who's not been able to take other assignments for you or for themselves. They've reserved that time. You've got some obligations. I think if you want to maintain those relationships, you've got some obligation to them. You may have already ordered books or materials or supplies. And I think that as long as you are crystal clear in your contracts and your proposals about what your cancellation policy is, saying, at 30% if you cancel 7 days or less out from our, our scheduled start date, I think that's more than adequate. I do see that cancellation rate all the way up to 50%. But it certainly is, you want to make sure that whatever that rate is, that you're able to cover whatever costs you've had to incur to organize and get that class together.
All right. Just one question is clarifying. I think it was earlier when you were talking about the operating margin. If you're basing that off of gross revenue.
Yes, your operating margin. You start with your gross revenue. So if you're looking at an individual contract, is what is it that I'm actually charging that client? So I've got a contract for $10,000. That's my gross revenue, and then I'm going to take from that any promotional expense that I've incurred. Maybe this was we did a special offering of some kind, or it was maybe my direct salesperson went out there and did it. So that means my promotion expense is really nothing. We do see promotion expense in terms of contract training being less than what you're doing on the open enrollment side, because it really is a direct sales environment. But then your production costs. So what is it going to take you to deliver that? So if I've got a $10,000 contract and I've got my instructor, it's a 20-hour workshop, and my instructor costs me $100 an hour, then I've got $2,000 worth of that expense, and maybe I've got some additional copying expense or room expense. You want to put that in there as part of that direct cost. The difference between those, the revenue at $10,000 and your $2,000 plus in terms of production costs, the difference between those two gets you to your operating margin.
Okay, and I think the clarification came in was, and that was based on salary 6 to 20 times salary, the gross revenue?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
You're looking at 6 to 20 times their salary should lead you to, so the salesperson is, yes, it is compared to your gross revenue. Yes, gross. You're exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. All right, a couple other questions. One here for Evelyn. Evelyn, do you also offer business services like SBDC? And if so, how do you work with them on leads?
Actually, SBDC, that is just starting for us. Yes, it's a good question. It's a new area. SBDC does report to our division, to our Dean of Workforce and Economic Development. She's located here at Workforce Training Center. And we have 2 SBD centers in our geographic area here that we work with. And I think my boss would concur that it's a huge opportunity, untapped mostly. They've done some of the, obviously some of the consulting. They do some smaller workshops for things like QuickBooks or those types of things. But we think that there is potential to partner with them on best serving the community on behalf of CNM. And we've actually just now added one of the centers onto our website with the Augustov Lumens tool that I've mentioned. So in using Lumens now, we have a catalog for SBDC and an icon, and we're trying to brand them as part of our division. We've added them to our organizational chart. So we are just now rolling this out and scratching the surface, and we think that there is considerable potential for that.
Great. A couple of other questions on some of the benchmarking that you talked about. Is there a benchmark for revenue versus expenses, i.e. profit?
Yes. Yeah, there is a benchmark. So not only are you looking at operating margin, but you're also looking at your debt. And so you take your operating margin and you take away any of your administrative fees, and you get to net margin, and that should be, with contract training, should be around 20%. So you are looking at a profit margin of about 20%, and we're able to do that in contract training because we have a little bit more control over how much we're actually charging our clients, and you've got some flexibility. And the way that we price things, you know, is often relevant to what the market will actually bear, and that will and that allows us to have a little bit more of a margin there.
Okay, and then kind of a follow-on to Evelyn's previous question. What is SBDC? Some people aren't familiar with that apparently.
SBDC, I'm sorry, I should have said that. SBDC stands for Small Business Development Center. It's actually nationwide. Most states have SBDC programs. They really work with individuals on a consulting level to establish that are starting up their own small businesses. I think I used to hear it in terms of the moment you hire an employee, now you're kind of out of their target market. They're working with people that are really startups in small business. But they do a lot of very good work in most communities, and we find them to be wonderful for servicing small business.
A lot of SBDCs are co-funded by the local community college. They often exist within the local community college, as well as they're funded by the Small Business Administration, or SBA. And so you'll see there's lots of collaborative partnerships between you know, those two organizations. So you know, the SBDCs have got some funding that comes from their community college partner, or they're housed with the workforce development boards. And then the SBA also helps fund them.
All right. A few more questions we've got here. Do you have an example of a customer service evaluation that you'd be willing to share? This person says we use level 1 at the end of classes, but are interested in your next level of follow-up.
Sure, I'd be happy to send you kind of our level 2, a copy of that. You know, I'll send it to you, Chris, and then you can share with the group.
We get it to the person who responded. Do most institutions invoice a portion of the contract before training starts?
Most of the organizations that I've worked with throughout the country are limited by their business service, their business office, in terms of when they can fund something and when they can charge the client. And oftentimes, you know, their policies are really bad. I can't charge for this until after the service has been completed. And so most organizations are kind of limited by that, so we see that as kind of a standard way of invoicing across the country. But if your organization allows you to, you know, bill periodically, in particular with large contracts, you know, that span over several months, they do provide some flexibility in terms of being able to bill on a periodic basis. And so we see that with large contracts. But check with your business office if you're thinking of charging something, you know, something different, some way to do that differently.
If I may add to that, we actually invoice on the start date of training. We're allowed to invoice on the start date, and we allow generally a net 30 turnaround, so they have 30 days to pay. So if their training is for a day, that's one thing, but if it's going on for several weeks, we'd like to get that payment in within 30 days. We also negotiate terms quite a bit, but using the tool to invoice, our default is the start date of training and 30 days to pay.
There you go.
A couple of other people just requested copies of the customer service evaluation, so I just want to let people know that we'll get those out to everybody who wants one. And in fact, I can just send it to the whole group if everybody's interested in that. A couple other questions we have. Are you considering marketing costs, promotional costs?
Yes. Yes, we do. Yep.
And if you could just explain again what you meant by admin fees.
Administrative fees are your salaries for the staff. If you've got to pay anything in terms of keeping the lights on, any kind of any kind of expenses that are associated with the administration and operation of your unit, outside of the direct costs associated with that particular contract. In a lot of organizations, your director, your dean, your executive director, your vice president, those are expenses that are covered by the institution in many cases, but sometimes your logistics people, your operations people, even your sales people, that does come out of your own local budget. So those are the kinds of things that you want to include in your administrative fees. A lot of organizations don't have to pay any kind of rent or keeping their lights on, and so that helps create those kinds of margins that you're able to get. But some organizations do in terms of having to pay rent or I've got to pay my utility bill. So that's the kind of thing that goes into that administrative fee bucket.
Okay. And then there's a question here. There seems to be a trend towards more integration of workforce with the academic and creating pathways from non-credit to credit. Any general thoughts on this?
It is a trend that I'm seeing. I literally just last week got back from the National Association of Workforce Educators conference in Long Beach, California, and it is a trend that we're seeing kind of across the board, and it's really a result of the economic impact on our institutions for the credit side of the house. So we've not only have lost budget to help us operate the credit side of the house, but we're also seeing increase in enrollments, and so which is typical in these kind of economy that we're experiencing right now. And so in order to accommodate those students that need to take something on the need to take a credit course, we're seeing a shift in terms of having credit being offered through contract training or even through your open enrollment offerings. We're seeing credit being able to be awarded in a number of different ways. The other impact that I'm seeing is that as budgets are reduced, one of the key targets is that middle layer of management. So it's the deans, it's the directors level. As they cut those down, as a matter of fact, I was just talking with a dean of workforce development at the College of the Desert, and they have gone from 11 deans to 5. And as they do that, you've got multiple programs now reporting into a single dean. And what happens with the career and technical education deans or the occupational education deans, whatever we're calling the workforce development deans these days, they're also picking up the non-credit offerings. And so they get contract training, they get oftentimes get community education. So that is definitely a trend that we're seeing. And so, it is. I think it is a result of what's going on in the economy and the budget impact that we're the budget impacts that we're experiencing. But there is some, value, I think, to having both sides of the house talk to each other as we look at this workforce development continuum, all the way from being able to, upskill somebody in terms of having them be more employable or getting them into a new occupancy, a new occupation, but all the way through to, dealing with the, the incumbent worker and upskilling them and helping organizations become more profitable. It really is a continuum. And people in the career technical education field are dealing with one end of the spectrum, and we often are in our continuing education and contract training businesses are working at the other end of the spectrum. So it does make some sense for us to be potentially, working a little more closely together.
Great. All right. Well, I think we've run through all the questions that we have here, and it looks like we're getting close to the top of the hour. So unless there's any other questions at this point, I think we'll probably just wrap things up here. And so wanted to thank both Leslie and Evelyn for taking the time to present today. It was great information, and I'm sure our audience appreciates it. And just wanted to let people know, if you do have interest in learning more about lumens, which Evelyn was talking about, and how they're using it at Central New Mexico, we'd be more than happy to set you up with a demo. And you can request that by just contacting our sales department, or if you also just go to our website, you can just fill out a form there as well to get signed up for a demo. So I think with that, any closing thoughts either from Leslie or Evelyn?
No, I just really appreciate your time and attention today, and hopefully we've been able to provide you with some inside tips on how to better manage your contract training business. And feel free to, give me a buzz or send me an email if you've got any additional follow-up questions you'd like me to address. I'm going to say the same thing goes for Evelyn, too, I'm guessing.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Leslie. I certainly am always happy to help any peers. I've been here at Workforce Training Center for a little over 11 years. Been a salesperson, been a program coordinator, and now as associate director and responsible more on the operations and finance end of things. I can certainly, I have a lot of empathy for people in those positions. I definitely know that we've come a long way, that the helpfulness of having tools that work for us has made a huge difference. I can say that CNM has unique desires to really serve our community pretty much at a kind of a break-even level. I mean, we're not here to certainly, we don't want to lose money for the college, but we're not here to make millions off our community. We're a modest part of the college. We think it's important to serve businesses in this area, to serve economic development, to cover our costs, so our margins matter. But every college is different, and CNM is looking at this as a helpful part of the college, I think an important part of the college. We are seeing more opportunities with the credit side of the college as well. So if anybody needs me, my contact information is there. Send a note. We're happy to help.
All right. Very good. Well, thanks again, everybody. And so with that, I think we will sign off. So have a great rest of the day. And happy Halloween, of course. Bye now.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Leslie.